The story begins in the quiet stillness of a humble tent, deep within the ancient lands of Canaan. For years, Rachel had prayed and wept for a child, her heart heavy with longing. She watched as her sister Leah bore son after son while she remained barren. But in her anguish, she never wavered in her faith. And then, one fateful night, her cries were answered. A son was born to Rachel and Jacob, a son they named Joseph. The flickering light of an oil lamp illuminated the scene, casting a warm glow over the soft straw where Rachel cradled her newborn. Her face, though pale with the strain of childbirth, shone with joy as she gazed at the tiny life in her arms. Jacob knelt beside her, his rough hands trembling as he reached out to touch the infant's cheek. This child, this miracle, was more than just an answer to their prayers. He was a symbol of hope, a testament to God's faithfulness. "Rachel," Jacob whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "He's the blessing we have waited for." As the night deepened, the family's world seemed to hold its breath, savoring the beauty of a moment that would shape the course of history.
My sweet Joseph, you are the answer to my prayers, the light of my heart. The Lord has been so gracious to me, and I will teach you to walk in his ways. You will grow strong, my son, and your name will carry meaning far beyond this moment. You are loved more than words can say. Rest now, my child. The world awaits you, but for now, you are safe in my arms.
Joseph's early years were filled with laughter and innocence. He was the youngest of Jacob's sons at the time, a child born into a sprawling family of shepherds. Though life was often harsh in the rugged hills of Canaan, Joseph's world felt safe and filled with wonder. He spent his days running barefoot through the fields, chasing lambs under the watchful eyes of his parents. Rachel would often call him back, her voice lilting with a mixture of love and caution, while Jacob would gather him on his knee, sharing tales of their ancestors and the God who guided them. But this idyllic childhood carried an undercurrent of tension. Joseph's older brothers watched as their father's affection for him grew more pronounced. They saw the way Jacob's eyes lit up whenever Joseph entered the room, the way Rachel doted on him with a love she reserved for no one else. The seeds of envy were sown early, though Joseph remained blissfully unaware. In his youthful innocence, he could not see the storm brewing around him. One day, Jacob's love for Joseph took a tangible form, a gift that would ignite the smoldering jealousy of his brothers into a raging fire. It was a coat, but not just any coat. This garment was a masterpiece, woven with threads of vibrant colors that seemed to capture the light of the sun. Jacob draped it over Joseph's shoulders, smiling as he saw how the boy's face lit up with delight. "Father, it's beautiful," Joseph exclaimed, running his fingers over the fine fabric. But the beauty of the coat was a double-edged sword. As Joseph wore it proudly, his brothers looked on from the shadows, their hearts burning with resentment. To them, the coat was not just a symbol of their father's love, it was a reminder of their own perceived inadequacy. They muttered among themselves, their voices low but laced with bitterness. Little did Joseph know this gift would become the catalyst for a series of events that would change his life forever. Joseph was a dreamer, and his dreams carried the weight of prophecy. They were vivid, almost tangible, and they filled him with a sense of wonder. One evening, as the family gathered for their evening meal, Joseph's excitement bubbled over. "I had a dream," he announced, his eyes shining with youthful enthusiasm. "We were binding sheaves in the field, and my sheaf rose upright while your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to mine." His brothers exchanged uneasy glances, their jealousy sharpening into anger. "Do you think you'll rule over us?" they snapped. But Joseph was undeterred. Another night, he shared a second dream. "I saw the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing to me," he said, his voice filled with awe. Even Jacob, who adored Joseph, felt uneasy. "Will your mother and I, along with your brothers, bow down to you?" he asked, though he pondered the meaning in his heart. Joseph's dreams were powerful, but they drove a wedge deeper into the already strained relationships within the family. The fields of Canaan, golden under the midday sun, were a place of work and tension. Joseph often brought messages and provisions from Jacob to his brothers as they tended the flocks. But each time he approached, their resentment grew. "Here comes the dreamer," they muttered as Joseph drew near, his colorful coat catching the light. Their words dripped with sarcasm and bitterness. To them, Joseph was not just a younger brother, he was a symbol of their father's favoritism, a constant reminder of what they lacked. As Joseph greeted them with a cheerful smile, they barely concealed their disdain. The air grew heavy, charged with unspoken anger, as they began to plot among themselves. The boy, blissfully unaware, was walking into the trap their jealousy had set. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the fields in hues of gold and crimson. Joseph, his multicolored coat fluttering in the breeze, approached his brothers with a basket of food, but the smiles he expected were replaced with cold glares. Without warning, they seized him. "What are you doing?" Joseph cried, struggling against their grip. His pleas fell on deaf ears as they stripped him of his coat, the garment tearing slightly in their haste. Dragging him to a nearby cistern, they cast him into its depths. The darkness closed in around Joseph as he hit the dry, hard bottom, his cries echoing up the walls. Above, the brothers sat, eating the food Joseph had brought, their laughter masking the gravity of their actions. The coat lay discarded, its vibrant colors dulled by the dirt. As Joseph lay trembling in the pit, his brother's next plan began to take shape. A caravan of Ishmaelite traders appeared on the horizon, their camels laden with spices and goods bound for Egypt. Judah's voice cut through the air. "Why kill him? Let's sell him to the traders." The brothers pulled Joseph from the pit, binding his hands with rough ropes. He struggled, his voice breaking as he pleaded for mercy, but their hearts were hardened. The traders handed over 20 pieces of silver, and Joseph was led away, his eyes filled with tears as he looked back at his brothers for the last time. The land of Canaan faded into the distance as he was carried toward Egypt, a slave bound for an uncertain future. The bustling streets of Egypt were overwhelming, a chaotic symphony of noise and color. Joseph, bound and weary, was led through the throngs of merchants and citizens. His tattered coat hung loosely on his shoulders, a stark reminder of all he had lost. Among the crowd stood Potiphar, a high-ranking official in Pharaoh's court. His eyes, sharp and calculating, settled on Joseph. "This one," Potiphar said, gesturing to the traders. Coins exchanged hands, and Joseph's fate was sealed. He was led into Potiphar's estate, his heart heavy with fear, but his faith unbroken. Joseph entered Potiphar's house as a slave, but his diligence and integrity soon set him apart. Every task he was given, no matter how small, was done with care and excellence. Potiphar noticed, and over time, Joseph was entrusted with the management of the entire household. Under Joseph's supervision, the estate flourished, a testament to his wisdom and God's favor. Potiphar, impressed by the young man's abilities, trusted him implicitly, unaware of the trials that lay ahead. But Joseph's success came with its own challenges. Potiphar's wife, captivated by Joseph's good looks and noble demeanor, sought to tempt him. Day after day, she approached him, her words laced with seduction. But Joseph stood firm. "How could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" he said, his voice resolute. One day, finding Joseph alone, she grabbed his cloak and demanded his affection. Joseph fled, leaving his cloak in her hands. Humiliated and furious, she concocted a lie, accusing Joseph of attacking her. Potiphar, enraged, had Joseph thrown into prison. Yet even in the darkness of the cell, Joseph's faith remained steadfast, a light that could not be extinguished. The prison was a dark and desolate place, its stone walls cold and unyielding, but Joseph did not let despair consume him. Stripped of his position in Potiphar's house and falsely accused, he found himself in chains, surrounded by criminals and the forgotten. Yet Joseph's faith remained unshaken. He prayed fervently, his words rising like incense to heaven, and in his prayers he found strength. The prison keeper, observing Joseph's calm demeanor and hard work, soon entrusted him with responsibilities. Though bound by walls, Joseph's spirit was free, for he knew God was still with him. One fateful morning, 2 new prisoners were thrown into the cell block, Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker. Their faces, once accustomed to the opulence of the royal palace, now bore the marks of fear and uncertainty. Joseph noticed their troubled expressions and, moved by compassion, approached them. When they shared their dreams, Joseph listened intently, sensing that these were not mere visions but messages from God. To the cupbearer, Joseph revealed that his dream foretold restoration to Pharaoh's service. But to the baker the interpretation was grim, a prophecy of his execution. As Joseph spoke, the weight of his words filled the dim prison, and the 2 men hung on every syllable. Joseph's faith shone brightly even in the shadow of their fates. Pharaoh's birthday brought both celebration and reckoning. In the grand halls of the palace, the sounds of music and laughter filled the air, but behind the festivities lay the fulfillment of prophecy. The cupbearer was restored to his position, presenting Pharaoh's golden cup with a deep bow, his face alight with relief. The baker, however, was led to his grim fate, his final moments, a stark reminder of the power wielded by Egypt's ruler. Despite the cupbearer's joyous return, Joseph's name was forgotten in the revelry. The hope he had placed in the cupbearer's promise faded, leaving Joseph to endure more years in the confines of the prison. Yet Joseph clung to his faith, trusting that God's timing was perfect. 2 years passed, and one night Pharaoh was gripped by dreams so vivid they shook him to his core. In his first vision, 7 sleek and fat cows grazed by the Nile, only to be devoured by 7 gaunt and ugly cows. In another, 7 full heads of grain were consumed by 7 thin and scorched heads. Pharaoh awoke in a cold sweat, the images seared into his mind. He summoned his magicians and wise men, but their interpretations fell short. It was then that the cupbearer, remembering Joseph, spoke up. "My lord," he said, "there is a man in your prison, a Hebrew, who can interpret dreams." Pharaoh's eyes narrowed, and with a wave of his hand, he ordered Joseph to be brought before him. The stage was set for the unfolding of God's plan. Joseph stood before Pharaoh, freshly shaven and clothed, his composure unshaken despite the grandeur of the throne room. Pharaoh, his brow furrowed, recounted his dreams, his voice laced with urgency. Joseph listened intently and then spoke, his words confident yet humble. "It is not I," he said, "but God who will give Pharaoh the answer he seeks." With clarity and precision, Joseph explained the dreams. 7 years of abundance would be followed by 7 years of famine, so severe it would erase the memory of prosperity. He urged Pharaoh to appoint a wise man to oversee the collection of grain during the years of plenty, storing it for the years of want. Pharaoh, struck by Joseph's wisdom, saw not just a slave but a man favored by the divine. Pharaoh rose from his throne and, before the gathered court, declared, "There is no one as wise and discerning as Joseph." In a moment that defied all expectations, Joseph was adorned with Pharaoh's own signet ring, a fine linen robe, and a gold chain. He was given authority over all of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. The slave who had been cast into a pit, sold into Egypt and imprisoned, was now a ruler, his life transformed by the hand of God. As Joseph stood on the steps of Pharaoh's palace, the weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders. Yet he felt a deep peace, knowing he had been placed in this position for a divine purpose. Joseph wasted no time. He traveled throughout Egypt, organizing the collection of grain during the 7 years of abundance. Vast storehouses were constructed, filled to overflowing as the land yielded bountiful harvests. Farmers and workers marveled at Joseph's foresight and efficiency, his leadership inspiring trust and respect. As the years of plenty passed, Joseph's preparations stood as a testament to his wisdom and God's guidance. The storehouses became symbols of hope, silent sentinels standing ready for the trials that lay ahead. Then came the famine. The skies grew harsh, the rains ceased, and the earth cracked under the relentless sun. Crops withered, and hunger spread like a shadow over the land. People from across Egypt and beyond came to Joseph, begging for grain. Standing at the gates of the storehouses, Joseph oversaw the distribution, his compassion evident as he ensured no one was turned away. Word of Egypt's provisions spread far and wide, drawing even those from distant lands. The famine that threatened to destroy became a stage for Joseph's leadership, a light in the darkness for countless lives. Among those who came seeking food were Joseph's own brothers. They arrived in Egypt, weary from their journey, unaware that the ruler they would bow before was the brother they had betrayed. Joseph recognized them immediately, but he did not reveal himself. His heart stirred with emotion, anger, sorrow, and longing all at once. To test their hearts, Joseph spoke harshly, accusing them of being spies. The brothers protested, pleading their honesty and revealing details of their family. Hearing of Benjamin, Joseph's only full brother, Joseph devised a plan to see if their hearts had changed. As part of his test, Joseph ordered Simeon to be bound and held until the brothers returned with Benjamin. The brothers' protests filled the air, their desperation palpable. "This is our punishment for what we did to Joseph," they murmured among themselves, unaware that Joseph understood every word. Joseph turned away, his composure faltering as tears welled in his eyes. Yet he hardened his heart, knowing the plan was necessary. As the brothers departed with grain, the tension of unspoken truths hung heavy, the bonds of family strained but not yet broken. When the brothers returned to Canaan, their faces were heavy with worry, and their steps faltered as they approached Jacob's tent. They had brought grain, but the price of their provisions weighed heavily on their hearts. Inside the humble tent, Jacob listened as Reuben explained the events in Egypt. "The man who rules Egypt spoke harshly to us," Reuben said, his voice trembling. "He accused us of being spies. We told him about our family, and he held Simeon as a hostage. He said we must bring Benjamin to prove we are honest." Jacob's face grew pale. He gripped his staff tightly, his voice quivering with sorrow. "You have bereaved me. Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin." The tension in the room was suffocating as the brothers exchanged guilty glances. Though they had returned with food, the family now faced an impossible decision, and the shadow of Egypt loomed over them. The famine worsened, tightening its grip on the land of Canaan. The fields were barren, and the livestock grew thin. The once vibrant hills of Canaan now seemed lifeless, their beauty drained by the merciless sun. Jacob sat at the entrance of his tent, staring out over the desolate landscape, his heart heavy with worry. The family's provisions dwindled, and hunger gnawed at their resolve. Judah stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "Father," he said, "we must return to Egypt for more food, but we cannot go without Benjamin. The man warned us. Without him, we will not see his face." Jacob sighed deeply, the weight of the situation etched into every line on his face. "If it must be so," he said at last, his voice trembling, "then take Benjamin. But take gifts as well, balm, honey, spices, and almonds, and may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man." The brothers' journey back to Egypt was fraught with tension. When they arrived, they were ushered into Joseph's palace, where their hearts pounded with uncertainty. They presented their gifts, and Joseph's gaze lingered on Benjamin, the youngest brother he had longed to see. Joseph's steward brought them to a lavish feast, an unexpected gesture that left the brothers puzzled. The ruler's actions were kind, yet they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being tested. Little did they know the man who stood before them was the brother they had betrayed years ago. The dining hall was filled with the aroma of roasted meat and spices. Joseph, dressed in elegant Egyptian robes, sat at the head of the table, watching his brothers with a mixture of love and longing. He had arranged them in order of their birth, a detail that left them bewildered. As the servants brought food, Benjamin's portion was 5 times larger than the others. The brothers exchanged uneasy glances, their thoughts racing. Joseph observed them intently, looking for signs of jealousy, but he saw none. The feast was sumptuous, but the tension hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. The next morning, the brothers prepared to leave Egypt, their sacks filled with grain. But Joseph had devised one final test. He instructed his steward to place his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. As the brothers began their journey home, they were overtaken by Joseph's men. "Why have you repaid good with evil?" the steward demanded. "My master's silver cup is missing," the brothers protested, confident of their innocence. "Search our sacks," they said, "and if the cup is found, the one who has it will die, and the rest of us will become your slaves." When the cup was discovered in Benjamin's sack, their world shattered. They tore their robes in anguish and returned to the palace, their hearts heavy with fear and guilt. Back in Joseph's palace, the brothers fell to their knees. Judah stepped forward, his voice trembling with emotion. "My lord," he began, "we cannot return to our father without Benjamin. His life is bound up with the boy's life. If Benjamin does not return, our father will surely die." Judah's words were filled with raw emotion as he offered himself in Benjamin's place. "Take me as your slave instead," he pleaded, "but let the boy go home to his father." Joseph's heart ached as he listened. Judah's sincerity pierced through years of pain and anger. The brothers who had once sold him into slavery were now willing to sacrifice themselves for each other. The time had come for the truth to be revealed. Joseph could no longer hold back his tears. He ordered everyone but his brothers to leave the room. Then, his voice trembling, he declared, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" The brothers froze, their faces pale with shock. They stared at Joseph, the ruler of Egypt, and saw in his eyes the boy they had betrayed. Fear gripped their hearts, but Joseph stepped forward, his voice gentle and filled with love. "Do not be afraid," he said. "What you intended for evil, God intended for good. It was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." When Pharaoh heard of Joseph's reunion with his brothers, he extended an extraordinary invitation. "Bring your father and your families to Egypt," he said. "You will have the best of the land." Joseph sent wagons and provisions back to Canaan. His brothers returned home, their hearts filled with hope, ready to deliver the miraculous news to their father. When Jacob saw the wagons and heard his son's words, his heart nearly stopped. "Joseph is alive," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion, "and he is ruler over all Egypt." Hope surged within him, and for the first time in years, his spirit was revived. "I must see him before I die," Jacob declared, his voice filled with determination. The day Jacob and Joseph were reunited was one of overwhelming emotion. As Jacob stepped off the wagon, Joseph ran to embrace him. They held each other tightly, tears streaming down their faces. "Now I can die in peace," Jacob said, his voice trembling, "for I have seen your face and know that you are alive." Jacob and his family settled in the fertile land of Goshen, a region blessed with lush pastures and flowing streams. Under Joseph's care, the family prospered. Though they were far from their homeland, they found peace and plenty, a testament to God's provision and Joseph's wisdom. Joseph oversaw the distribution of grain not only to the people of Egypt, but also to his own family. Each time his brothers came to the storehouses, they marveled at the efficiency and order Joseph had established. He ensured they lacked nothing, a quiet but powerful demonstration of his forgiveness and love. As Jacob's life drew to a close, he gathered his sons around him. With trembling hands and a voice filled with wisdom, he blessed each one, speaking of their futures and the destinies of their tribes. His words carried the weight of prophecy, binding the family together in a shared legacy that would endure for generations. Joseph continued to lead Egypt with wisdom and integrity. Though he held great power, he remained humble, always acknowledging God's hand in his life. His family grew, and he witnessed the blessings of peace and prosperity in the land. Yet he never forgot the promises of God, and his faith remained steadfast until the end. As Joseph's life came to an end, he gathered his family and spoke words of hope. "When God comes to your aid," he said, "carry my bones up from this place." Even in death, his faith remained steadfast, a beacon for generations to come. Joseph's passing marked the end of an era, but his legacy of faith and forgiveness lived on. As we come to the end of Joseph's incredible journey, we are reminded of the power of faith, forgiveness, and perseverance. Joseph's story shows us how God can use even the most difficult circumstances to fulfill his greater purpose. From betrayal by his brothers to becoming the ruler of Egypt, Joseph never lost his trust in God. Instead of seeking revenge, he chose to forgive, bringing healing and restoration to his family. Through Joseph's unwavering faith, we learn that God's plans for us are far greater than we can imagine. Even when life seems unfair or uncertain, trusting in his plan leads to blessings beyond our understanding. Joseph's wisdom and integrity remind us of the importance of working diligently and living with honesty, no matter the situation. Lessons for children. 1. Faith in God. Like Joseph, always trust in God, even in difficult times, knowing He is in control. 2. Forgiveness. Forgiving others brings peace to our hearts and can mend even the most broken relationships. 3. Hard work and integrity. Being diligent and honest, as Joseph was, brings respect and opens doors to greater opportunities. 4. God's plan. Remember that God has a purpose for your life, and every challenge you face is part of His perfect plan. As you reflect on Joseph's story, may you find inspiration to live a life of faith, kindness, and courage. Remember, God's love and grace are with you, guiding you through every moment of your journey. Thank you for joining us for this inspiring story of Joseph. We hope it has touched your heart and taught you valuable lessons about trusting God, forgiving others, and embracing the gifts He has given you. Don't forget to share this story with your friends and family, and keep watching for more exciting Bible stories. Together, let's grow in faith and inspire one another to live for His glory. God bless you. God